Sunday morning. We're coming in. I'm Hillary Metz. I'm the director of Blythe Projects. It's great to meet some new faces and see some familiar faces, great supporters along the way. Thank you so much. So I will be brief because I believe these two really need no introduction. I'd like to start with Howard Fox. Howard is the Emeritus Curator at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. I haven't spoken in front of more than 3 people. I'm like, wait, what's going on? Please be kind. At any rate, I'd like to just touch on a few of the many, many exhibitions Howard has done, beginning in 1985 at LACMA. He organized and authored catalogs for the avant-garde in the 80s, A Primal Spirit, 10 contemporary Japanese sculptors, Larry Pittman and Eleanor Anton. He was also a collaborating curator and contributing author for Made in California, Art, Image, and Identity, 1900 through 2000, and for Tim Hawkinson, co-organized by LACMA and the Whitney in New York. He also wrote a principal essay for the catalog accompanying the 2006 exhibition, Los Angeles 1955 through 1985, Birth of an Art Capital. Incredible exhibition, by the way. Organized by the Pompidou in Paris. And most recently, he organized a 20-year survey exhibition of LA-based multimedia artist Steve Roden for the Armory Center for the Arts in Pasadena. Thanks for being with us, Howard.
Blushing.
And of course, Tm Gratkowski, exhibiting artist on the walls. Tim, where to start with Tim? Tim, I believe, has been making art since birth. Psycho. And it's really a student of the world, really. I mean, he started off at the School of the Art Institute in Chicago, moved on to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where I believe Bruce Nauman also studied. You did a stint in Vienna, and wound up with a master's degree as well from SciArc here in Los Angeles. And I do say student of the world because I hope you've all had a chance to dive into the works a little bit. And on that note, let's dive right in. Take it away, gentlemen. Thank you.
In addition to being a flourishing artist whose work seems to be getting bigger and bolder in scale with every passing month, Tim has also recently emerged as one of the foremost impresarios in the art world here in Los Angeles, having been the primary force behind Flagstop. How many of you might have seen Flagstop down in Torrance a couple of weeks ago? Good, good. Tim and his very able collaborators really put together an impressive presentation, and as a first-time experiment, I think he really succeeded very well. So, he's a man of many, many talents. Tim, talk to us a little about your interest in collage. Usually, when we think of collage, we think of something that's kind of on a small scale. And when I first visited you in your studio downtown, maybe 8 years ago, my recollection is that you were working usually on something that was no larger than 8.5 by 11, maybe a little bit larger, but really very, very intimate work. And you were using minute little snippets of, for the most part, text that you had cut out of books and magazines. Now you've got this kind of whole symphonic range of these large-scale collages that read as very modulated compositions. Talk about your interest in building these things from small to large and how you just procedurally go about what you do.
So the idea, I guess, of the process and how
how you evolve to take on other ideas of creating works of art. Kind of how I interpret that question or that topic to discuss. But for the most part, my interest in collage didn't really come about as an interest in collage. It came.
Had you started as a painter? Or?
Yes, my background's in painting and drawing, and even when, and I don't consider myself, nor have I ever had considered myself a good painter. And it was always a very frustrating process. And very early on, as soon as you go through the traditional modes of oil and acrylics and everything else, it's like I quickly abandoned those for the ready instances of using many different materials. So multimedia works, mediums, and in that process of doing that, I liked the idea of what I could achieve using other bits and pieces in these paintings I was doing at the time. And then over time, and I'm talking about a very long period of time, this is post-art school, post-2 undergrad degrees, and well into master's thesis work, that I revisited old work and just started to look at my body of work and see what remained interesting to me, and what didn't, and seeing what I wanted to try next. And the idea of mixed mediums and using all these different materials was an interest, so I started with that. In essence, I believe that's also considered a way of collaging, gluing things into another context. And I started with that idea, and literally it was just a small, as they all are, they're all just experiments, and you don't know where it's going to go or what it's going to be.
So basically, you didn't start out with collage as a kind of quest. It was more a gradual transition process of unfolding discovery.
It really was. It was all about discovery. And then that discovery in that instance with this new little experiment I was trying, I just did them on little lunch bags that we've all taken to school. Some say lunch pails, I have lunch bags. And they're 5.5 by 9 inches, really small. And I decided that was an interesting format, other than traditional means of putting work on the wall on canvas and whatnot, to pop these things up. And I created all these little compositions, all based on a series. And they started almost the same way in which I saw the other works as having new things of interest. A lot of different materials in there. And then as I worked on these moments, I started to use less and less of all the other materials. And it became more and more paper. And at one moment, and I remember this exactly as I was looking at when I was going to do the next 5 little groupings, and realized there was so little paint or anything else, crayon, colored pencil, and the other ones, I'm like, I don't need it anymore. Somehow I was able to achieve all that rich and interesting surface with just the paper. And so I decided in these next 5 that I was going to just use paper. And I had that moment of doing that, going, wow, this is interesting to me, because it's the same but different, and I like that it lives kind of from that world into its own world, but still is directly tied to that. And it is, to me, it's still painting and drawing. And it was at that moment that I created those 5 that I went, wow, this interests me, this excites me. And then I literally went from the little one to pieces that are larger than this, vertical, to test it. And the idea of scale, it's one thing for that to be nice here, but what's the impact of it to have a life outside of just a simple idea or gesture into a bigger thing that really allows you to work. And it went from literally that moment to this moment.
So it's interesting what you're describing as a process of moments and quiet piecemeal discovery until you do have this kind of breakthrough incident where the clarity of where the future of the Blythe presented itself to you. I've been to your studio, and I know that you have a kind of fabulous collection of all kinds of imagery and text on pieces of paper. You've got virtually an archive, a library of little pieces of paper. How do you organize that? This is a matter of process. And maybe there's a kind of intellectual vision to it as well.
Yeah, I don't know, I'm stumbling on my words how to start, but I do see paper now all the time, and I have to collect it, and there's no way that I can create works personally without some type of organization in mind. There's too much to keep track of. There's no way you can do it. There's no way you can find some kind of harmony or composition in these with it being a really chaotic moment. And a lot of this frankly comes from my grandfather. His studio, he was a master framer, made frames for the artists in Chicago, made frames in Chicago. And his studio was meticulous all the time. And working in his studio as a kid, you know, it was me and my brother, and my dad would say the same thing to us. Well, if you use a tool, you need to put it back exactly where you found it when you're done with it. You know, they did have a little stencil around the hammer, so you know. You know, but the idea that I took from that was that what he said to me was the reason why. You know, it's one thing to just say things and have answers, but when you can explain why, it really sits with people. Was that if he had to go and look for the hammer every time he needed the hammer, he would spend more time looking for the hammer than really working. And that kind of sat with me in a very comfortable, like I got it, I experienced it, I heard it, and then I saw why. And because of that, he created beautiful works. And so I took that to heart and kind of did the same thing. So the studio, although it's not always organized and structured perfectly, there's a little bit of mess happening there, but it's a controlled mess. And it's the only way I can also, by processing, finding a piece of paper of a certain color, of a certain texture, with words, without words, you know, images of color, images without, like it's literally broken down in all those scenarios.
So you have actual files like
Yes.
blue matte, blue gloss.
Not so much the matte and the gloss, but it's colors, and it is. It's all text that are a certain color, all images that are a certain color, you know, all patterns that are not of a certain color. So it is broken down, because finding things and then filing it, I always have that moment of touching it, knowing where it is. So when I am working, I can go, oh yeah, I've got this image, and then I go get the image, pull it out, and see if it works, and then there it goes. So the time to actually go through piles of paper is kind of reduced considerably. And it makes that immediacy of working, which is another thing about the work and why I do it, because I like to work fast and immediate, because I think it's more honest, it's less rehearsed, it's less controlled, it's not tight. There's this freedom like a sketch